full disclosure before I start this story, I don't know all of it to be 100%. I just have to throw that out there for any fact checkers out there. But let me tell you the pieces I know and how I know them. So there was a boxing fight, okay, Friday night, and live on TV, and this guy gets in the ring to box. He's the second guy to walk out, so his opponent's in the ring. Announcements are done. Boom. His name's Curtis. And I don't do it to be condescending and not tell you his last name. I don't have the foggiest idea. First time I've ever seen this guy. First time I've ever heard about him, but his first name is Curtis. So the round starts. Boom. The bell rings. Right, you got one guy in this corner, one guy in this corner, referee in the middle, bell. Curtis walks out of the ring. So when he gets out of the ring, nobody knows what's happening. I don't believe this has ever been done before. In the history of the sport, certainly of televised sport, he gets out of the ring and the announcers, and even by the body language of the referee, the announcer's words, body language of the referee, everybody is setting the stage for him to get back in the ring. Almost as though, oh, silly Curtis, he forgot something. Was it a mouthpiece? What, is his shoe untied? Nobody knew what he was doing. Walks down the same stairs he had just walked up. Walks up the same ramp he had just walked down. Walks across the same stage he just come through. Walks out through the curtain, heads in the back. Curtis is done. He later came out, so disqualification, official result, 1 second into the very first round, Curtis is disqualified. So Curtis comes out and says he thought he was underpaid and he thought he was disrespected, and therefore this was his way of shoving it up the promoter's ass. Okay. I don't have the details on what that means, but I feel as though I've seen this story enough times that I could accurately guess he was unhappy with his pay. It then comes out, and here's the second piece of the story, and here's where it gets very interesting. His trainer, his own trainer, comes out and puts the mouth to him. I mean, it's like a four-letter word laced rant insulting Curtis for humiliating boxing, for doing this to the business, the promotion, and the fans. But then ultimately he comes around and says, and now I don't get paid. I did my job as a trainer, and now I don't get paid. That's where I want to talk about this story, because that's where it gets interesting. So let's just look at the economics of the fight game. Okay, a trainer standardly would get 10%. Whatever that percent is, a trainer still gets X percent by the laws and industry standards of what his fighter is to make. The trainer saying he doesn't get paid tells me that the fighter was then not paid, and that's where this gets very fascinating, because per the contract, to show, as I understand it, and I am a licensed promoter, one of the few licensed promoters you'll ever hear from, so I not only understand it from a fighter's perspective, I'm familiar with the promoter's obligations, but show means to weigh in. Once you weigh in, okay, the card is subject to change, and the promoter has to take all sorts of risks, but the promoter can also shuffle the deck until the weigh-ins have concluded. Now your card is set. You cannot shuffle the deck because you cannot re-weigh a fighter in. You cannot bring somebody else in because the scales have closed, so your opportunity is now limited. Should something happen between the close of the scales and the event, promoter's on the hook as far as it pertains financially. Now the fans are also on the hook in most jurisdictions in that the card is subject to change. Wash, everybody takes a risk, but it's very seldom that you're going to be confronted with this kind of situation. So let's take the trainer at his word and deduce what we can. The trainer says that he was not paid, so we are going to deduce that the fighter was not paid, and I am here to tell you I would like an explanation to that, because the rules as I understand them, and it does matter what jurisdiction you're in. I have to disclose that. So I don't know the rules there. I don't actually know the rules of the jurisdiction they're in. In fact, I couldn't even cite the jurisdiction for you. I could find that out very quickly, but I don't have it at the time that I'm making this video. So, wherever they are, though, there is either a rule that to show does not mean weigh in as it does in most places. Okay, fine. In my opinion, he did show. He did walk into the ring and he did show. And the official results will support my premise, because it shows that the contest was concluded in 1 second of the very first round by disqualification. So first off, whether it was for a second or not, he showed. Look, I don't like these rules. And I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, Chael, how are you arguing that Curtis should be paid? Curtis should be stiffed. Curtis stiffed everybody else. Curtis did not go out there and reasonably perform his job to a reasonable expectation. I fully agree with you. I'm just speaking to you from my understanding of the rules, whether we like them or not. Curtis went out there, and the record will reflect he went out there and was disqualified. Now, as much as you may not like a disqualification, okay, quitting is very much allowed in today's workforce, and that includes combat sports. Many of you have quit jobs, and many of you have gone to jobs. You either quit or you were fired or you were disqualified in this case, because you did not give your level best effort. Whether that's true or not, in the world of capitalism, the boss can choose to not have you back to the job site, not have you back to the job, and not expect you to duplicate that performance that he saw substandard to begin with, but he still has to pay you for your time. So what I am suggesting for you is the trainer that says that he was not paid would offer for us that Curtis was not paid, and I'm telling you that that is not the rules as I understand them. He walked out there. Now, his career, I think, said goodbye the same time that his ass went through those ropes. But that, per the rules, as I understand them, is the consequence. The other part of this, from a legal standpoint, and many people have already weighed in on this, and they said, but he didn't go out there and compete. He was hired to compete. That's not true. That is a level expectation, but nowhere in that contract does it use the word compete. He is paid to show. Show is then defined as weigh in. So to go even a step further, he still got into the ring, as the record reflects, by a 1 second disqualification, and you are allowed in the sport of combat and in any other walk of life, you are allowed to quit. It's actually part of it. Generally in this sport, you quit after the opponent makes you quit and pushes you to your limits and does certain damage. I understand that those are reasonable expectations. I'm just here to share with you those are not written down within the contract. And when these contracts are done under commissioned forces and that money is secured through a bond, it's not the promoter's call. The commission has already secured the funds and will disperse them at the end of the night. So somewhere the promoter pushed back and the commissioner would have had to agree that he did not adequately show, which I'm telling you is not right. That is not the rule as I understand it or I've ever understood it, whether I like it or not. And this has been tested before, maybe never in this manner, but you guys will recall a couple of decades ago, one of the top boxers in the world named Timothy McCall was in the ring with, I believe, Lennox Lewis, and he broke down to what is best we understand a mental breakdown. That's the best it was ever explained to us, the audience. 20 years have gone by. That's still the best explanation we ever had, but it was roughly the 5th round. Timothy McCall just began crying. He began crying in the ring of a world heavyweight fight. Nobody understood why, and finally he had to just quit and say stop the fight, and they did stop it, and the promoter tried to not pay him and say, well, you did not go out there and fight. You didn't fight. You gave up. Giving up is allowed. Giving up is part of it. And that may affect your career. It may affect you ever coming back. So the reason I keep saying that and offering that is I don't want this to be a judgment on, oh, Chael sharing an opinion that what this guy did is fine. That's not what I maintain at all. I just do maintain that the rules are set and show, as I understand it, most certainly did happen. You also have to look at it from a legal perspective. For there ever be a crime committed in a situation like this where you're dealing with business, the business would have had to have lost something. And businesses historically can make two claims for what they have lost. One is reputation, if you were to go out and damage their brand. That's a little harder argument to claim, but they certainly could make it in this case. I don't think they would prevail, but they could make it. And then more obviously is a monetary loss. That simply did not happen. That audience was not refunded their money, and the network that bought the television rights didn't pay any less. As a matter of fact, it turned into a wonderful piece of theater on accident, but it turned into a wonderful piece of theater, and the ratings and everything else certainly were upheld that night. So when the business does not lose out on the back end, but attempts to make a front-end argument that we should be able to have a windfall and save on his purse because he did not show, ultimately you have to defer to a contract. And I don't know that this is ever going to be challenged. You know, one thing that you guys will learn as you go through life, a contract is only as good as the lawyers that can argue about it and a judge who can decide upon it. So I would be very surprised if Curtis had the means to go out and hire a legal team and take on an organization like this. It's ultimately probably going to be his best argument, a few phone calls and a text or an email or two, versus whether they want to hand him that check or not. But I'm telling you, if this was ever tested, they owe him that money.